Hey, what's up everyone? Jeremy here, and welcome back. This is part 2 of website speed optimization. And in our last video, we went over some big components to speeding up that website, from compressed images and storing cache to hosting providers and database cleanup. Today we are more into the refining aspect of website speed, although some of these improvements can result in a drastic speed improvement though. So let's get right on to it. If you are using a WordPress website, you are going to need to consider the different features that it offers already to speed up your website. So the next thing I'm speaking of is known as pingbacks and trashbacks. What these do is basically allow for you to be notified if someone mentions your website on their website, as well as vice versa. I've always found it beneficial to just go ahead and disable them both in your WordPress settings. They typically do more harm than good. You can turn off pingbacks and trashbacks through the discussions tab in settings if you're using WordPress. So just right down the left hand side, you can go ahead and do that. But anyways, just right on to the next thing, and this counts for Drupal, Joomla, WordPress, any content management system. And you could even relate this to functions that are large, that even if you develop them yourself, you should be weary of slow plugins and slow attachments to your websites. So any kind of a feature that might hold down your website is something that you need to be on top of, and the way to do that, at least for WordPress, you might have realized how much I favor WordPress, which it is an awesome tool. But with WordPress, we can use this plugin known as P3, which offers us a very nice run through and stats on how each of our each of the plugins on our websites are holding down the website. So depending on the wear and tear a certain plugin does, it might be best just to completely shut it off, or maybe cut out a certain function that you need of it, or rewrite that function yourself if the ends justify the means at that time. But either way, that is a big thing that people overlook. And let me just say, people get so caught up in getting all their plugins downloaded when they first get a WordPress website, and they'll get all these different plugins and they think they need all these different things, and maybe they need, or it could be advisable to have some of these plugins, but honestly you need to be extremely careful, because these are just people writing these programs that are not necessarily they really aren't checked over as thoroughly as maybe one might assume. And we're not talking about certain plugins, like bigger ones made by Automatic, the company that is behind WordPress, or there are plenty other very stable plugins. But regardless, you can't depend on these too much unless it's a necessary component, or it's just the route to go, like an e-commerce plugin. That just makes sense, and certain security reasons that they are just going to do a better job than one person or even a group of 5 or 10 people, because they have tens upon tens and sometimes hundreds of people working on some of these things. So anyways, on to the next thing we needed to get onto. When you have all your CSS, which is your cascading style sheets, the styling of your website, all the coloring, all the any kind of spacing, all the things that are going to tell your website what to do in certain styling forms, for instance, fonts, colors, all these different things. We leave that to CSS, cascading style sheets, and an example of some CSS would be this little section right here. It's a good little bit. It allows us to declare what this website should look like. So I'm not trying to get too far into CSS, anyways, just so you have an idea on what CSS actually is. And with CSS, you have all these different files. I mean, there are so many different CSS files typically on a lot of these websites, and when it comes to how many CSS files you're calling in and all this, you really should be weary on how many you're using. So honestly, a website should not have more than a few CSS files, because it's just unnecessary. But there is a function inside of your Htaccess file, and I'm just going to run through this real quick for people that might care about this thing, and it does help. It really does. But if you turn on Keep Alive, which is a function I will post down below, and all you do is post this little piece of code in your Htaccess file, which pretty much when you enable Keep Alive, it allows for multiple requests from the server without additional permission. Below is how you can do this with Htaccess, and I'd recommend you do it. However, it's not going to damage you too much. So moving on, it is extremely advisable as well to keep your CSS files at the top of your website, and then keep your JavaScript files at the bottom of your website. Now, let me give you an example. So if you can keep your CSS files as close to the top as possible, and in this particular situation, and this is just one of those small things I'm going over, but just to be honest, I even have JavaScript at the top a little bit, so yeah, it's not going to kill you, but it's just advisable. It's one of those things that you can meticulously go over, and it will improve your site speed. But anyways, and the bulk of your JavaScript, and all of them if you can, at the bottom, and your CSS files at the top. Why this is better, who knows really, but just the CSS runs faster at the top, JavaScript at the bottom. I've said that 3 times, but okay. So anyways, so it's important to note also that if you have a lot of JavaScript, or your site is extremely heavily dependent on JavaScript, your website might not run correctly if you put certain JavaScript at the bottom. So you gotta just work with it, and anyways, so I'm just gonna run through these last couple of things, and a few things, but it is a good idea to always go over your CSS and JavaScript and see if there's anything that you can remove. Maybe white space, anything that's just not necessary, characters, certain things that were overwritten that you don't need anymore, you're not going to use, etc. This is for both CSS and JavaScript. This is extremely advisable. And onto your content delivery network. If you don't know what that is, a CDN is a network that delivers static pages to different users on your website, pretty much based on their geographic location to each server. So if you're closer to this computer, it'll send you that information. It's kind of a pretty smart way to distribute information across your network. Now, you should trade your PHP for HTML at any point you can. So if there's a certain text or whatever that could be performed with HTML, do so, because it runs faster, it's more native to the web. HTML runs faster than PHP. It's a good idea to do so. And last but not least, we need to have a clean sweep of the website, and this is going to include everything but not limited to maybe extra widgets, irrelevant content, images, videos, etc. That you don't need anymore, and it's just building up in your website. So if there's anything that you can remove, just on the basis of space, remove it. Go ahead. That'll definitely help out everything, and yeah, that's really the last thing I can come up with. But space is space. When it comes to especially videos and images, oh my goodness, especially if they're not compressed properly. So At that, thanks for watching, and please subscribe. Feel free to leave me a comment down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, take care guys.